Hi everybody, so today's video is going to be about section 5.4, and our target for today is going to be to graph a linear function given an equation, given a table, or given a situation in context. Now what's going to be different about our equations today is that the equations we're graphing today will only have one variable. Here's what I mean by the equations will only have one variable. If you look at this equation right here, the equation says x equals 1. Normally, when we graph an equation, we have both an x and a y in the equation, but this equation only has an x. If you look at this equation, it says y equals 4. Normally, when we graph an equation, we have both an x and a y, but this equation only has a y. What? What that tells me is that when I graph these lines, it's going to look a little different than the lines that I'm used to graphing. In order to figure out what this looks like, let's start by making a table. Now, this first equation tells me that the x value in my table should be -1, but it does not tell me anything about the y value. Since I need more than one ordered pair in my table, I'm going to list the number -1 more than one time. Now, since the equation does not specify that the y variable has to have a certain number, I'm going to pick my favorite numbers for y, which are going to be -2, -1, 0, and 1. If I graph these ordered pairs on my graph, I get -1, -2 is right here, -1, -1, -1, 0, and -1, 1. What I'm noticing is that all of those points are arranged on the graph in a vertical line. So when I connect the dots, the graph of this equation ends up looking like a vertical line. Now that's a little different than any of the lines we've graphed before because normally our lines are slanted on the graph like this, and instead this is a straight vertical line. So what we need to learn from this is that equations that only have an x variable, so if you see an equation that only has an x, the graph is going to be a vertical line. Now let's look at the location of that vertical line. You'll notice the vertical line is left of the y-axis by one spot. The reason for that is because that is the place on the x-axis where the x value is -1. X is -1 tells me to make a vertical line that goes through the point on the x-axis where x is -1. Now let's look at what happens if our equation only has a y variable. So if our equation only has a y variable, then what that's telling me is that all of the y values for all of the points on this entire graph are always going to be 4. Now it does not tell me I need to choose a certain number for x, so I'm going to pick my favorite numbers, which are -2, -1, 0, and 1. The points that I would graph would be -2, 4, -1, 4, 0, 4, and 1, 4. Now looking at those points, they seemed to be arranged in a straight horizontal line. So this graph would be the horizontal line that goes through those points. What we need to learn from this is that if our equation has only a y variable, we are going to be graphing a horizontal line. Now let's look at the location of that horizontal line. So this horizontal line is up 4 spaces above the x-axis. This is the point where the y value is 4. So this tells me to draw a horizontal line, because the only variable is y, through the place on the graph where the y value is 4. All right, let's see some practice problems. So if I were to give you a practice problem like this one that says write the equation of the special line in the space below, and the graph has already been given. What I like to do when I want to write this equation is I like to make a table of values of points from the graph. So I would make an XY table. Points on this graph that are nice points would be like these points right here. So I could say that the points on the graph that are nice are the points 3, 3, 3, 2, 3, 1, 3, 0. What I'm noticing in this table is that all of the x's are always the number 3, which tells me the equation is going to be x equals 3, because x is the number that always stays the same. It also makes sense that the equation would be x equals 3 because we just learned that if you ever have an equation that just has the variable x, you're going to graph a vertical line. Well, since this is a vertical line, it makes sense that the equation would only have the variable x. Now, in the next graph, what I would do is I would make a table of values for some of the nice points on the graph. So nice points would be like the point that we see here in the middle and these points. If I were to write down those ordered pairs, it would be 0, -3, 1, -3, 2, -3, 3, -3. This time, the variable that is always the same number is the y variable. So my equation would be y equals -3 because the y variable is the one that always stays the same in the table. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to practice this idea of vertical and horizontal lines when I see you in class tomorrow, and I will talk to you then.